Valley Talk, just to chat a little bit about some of the things that are important to her. Good morning, Jo Ray.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for having me. It's great to see you again.
Well, it's nice to see you as always. I wanted to ask you if you could just, for the folks that have not met you before, and I'm sure they're the minority in our audience, but for those that haven't met you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I live in Albany with my husband, George. We just celebrated our 38th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've actually been together 43 years. And
that's a major accomplishment in itself these days, isn't it?
It is. And I'll give a little marriage advice while we're out there. Have fun. Life is short. Most issues are molehills. Don't make them into a mountain. Laugh often and hold hands.
Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah.
Laugh often and hold hands.
Yep, that's it. And so we have 2 kids, Stephen and Lisa. And our son Stephen is married to a Lisa. So that gets a little confusing for us every now and then.
So there's plenty of Lisa in your lives.
Plenty of Lisa, yes. And so between all of them, there's currently 10 grandkids. So we have a full life, and my husband George is a carpet installation contractor. And I currently work at Oregon State University in the Animal and Rangeland Science Department. So I'm looking forward to giving my resignation on May 19th.
You're really hopeful when it comes to running for this position in the House of Representatives. You think you've got a really good shot at it, don't you?
I do. I really do. This is a turning point year. And there's been so much that's been going on in the country, and people are really waking up and realizing that having a career politician may not be the wisest thing in the world.
So you're coming from a background of having been a family woman, raised your kids, have a good family still, and successful marriage, and a lot of experience in various aspects of society as well as occupations. You really have quite a varied background. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you've done throughout the years.
Okay, so I was a financial planner for many years. I actually got my first investment license in 1986, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, that's when you and I met. It was way back then.
That's when we first met.
Yeah, and so I've had my background in financial planning, financial advisor. I've been a real estate agent. In fact, you and Becky, the last house I ever sold was to you and your beautiful wife.
Which we appreciated your help. You are tremendous. In fact, to show you how Jo Ray will fight for you, potentially, as a member of the House of Representatives, she fought for us at closing the other party. It wasn't they were trying to pull shenanigans, but they, at the last moment, changed up some things that it wasn't supposed to be that way, and Jo Ray stood up for us and got things straightened up. Mm-hmm. I was impressed with how she not only stood up for us, but also with her knowledge of the actual facts and the way that things were supposed to work, and she straightened that out, lickety-split.
Thank you. Yeah, it's...
Well, we appreciate it.
That's just my personality. It's just the way that God made me. So, so I'm a Main Street American. George and I are you're ordinary people, and I, as I mentioned, career politicians, they lose touch with what is going on out there because they're in what I call the vortex of Washington, D.C.
Right. The longer they stay there, the more out of touch they tend to become.
Right. And they just don't quite understand sometimes. And being a Main Street American, I think that says a lot because we know what it's like to go through the good times and the rough times and everything that the majority of America goes through and the majority of Oregonians go through.
So let's talk about some of the things that are important issues to you. You've obviously got reasons why you're stepping out, and this is a huge sacrifice to run for public office, national office especially, and there are some issues that are important to you. I know, for example, you mentioned before we went on the air that the size of our government, the huge debt that we're under, these are important things to you. Tell us about why that's important.
Well, when we look at the Constitution, it's very clear what the role of the federal government is. When this country was set up, our founders were brilliant men. They understood that having a limited federal government overseeing the sovereign states was the best way to do it. So what we have is 50 individual sovereign units that we call states Now, to put that into context, Israel is a country, but it's also called a state. Okay?
Yeah, I've heard that phrase, the state of Israel, but
Right.
I've never thought in depth about it as to what exactly it means.
So it would be interchangeable. Okay? So it's one unit. We are 50 states. We could easily be 50 countries. But we're not. We're united under the umbrella of the United States. So we make one country of 50 units plus the territories.
But the federal government seems to run in such a way that they feel like that they're the boss of the states and can tell them what to do, and the people, as opposed to serving us, government of the people, for the people, by the people.
Exactly.
It seems to have got turned around a little bit.
It has. And so they have gotten so huge that they think that they're the ones that, just as you said, can tell us what to do, and that is wrong. So the only obligation that the states have is to not violate the Constitution. So it lays out in the first 9 articles specific issues that is reserved for the federal government. And then it says in the 10th Amendment, these things not specifically enumerated or listed are reserved to the states. So anything not listed here is for the states to decide upon their citizens, those who live in those specific states.
So are you of the mind then that individual states in our country presently do not have the kind of control of their own lives and the residents of those states of their own lives that they should have? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. There have been landmark cases where individual states voted that they don't want, and the Supreme Court ruled, so sad, too bad, we say you have to do it, and which is unconstitutional because that's legislating from the bench, and that's not the role of the court. It doesn't matter any court, but the Supreme Court has made those rulings to that it did not matter what the will of the people, the individual states were, and that was the whole idea. So if we go back a few hundred years, we realize that if we looked at religion, Pennsylvania was very strong with Quakers.
right.
Massachusetts was very strong with the Puritans. Okay, little bit different theology there. And so if people wanted to have something more along the line of the Quakers, they could easily go to Pennsylvania and live there in a community that met more with their personality and their views. And that was the whole idea. So that's just an example of what it used to be like. And so now we've got this government that they are spending money like there's no tomorrow. And the problem that we have is, and I just looked at the U.S. debt clock, and if people want to get a good idea, go to U.S. debt clock.
It's depressing.
It is depressing, but there's hope. Go to U.S. debt clock and look at the numbers. It is shocking. When I declared that I was going to be running, because I knew I would be, that was back in 2009, I actually made that statement. The U.S. debt was around, around $9 trillion, $10 trillion.
Yeah.
I just looked, it's 19.3.
Wow.
Now, how do I put that into context? It is next to impossible. Imagine $100 bills is $10,000. You would have to, and I was just looking up, and there's some graphs out there that I encourage people to go out and look at, but it would be more than a football field of pallets of $100 bills stacked about 6 feet tall.
That's our debt?
That's $1 trillion.
Oh, I see.
19 times that.
Oh, my.
It's huge. It is huge. We can't sustain it. So what has happened? I'll give you a couple of examples. There's all these federal grants that are given. And what has happened is when an area becomes a metropolitan area, it used to be at 50,000 people. So a few years ago, when Albany hit 50,000 people, the city was, yay, now we get federal money, except for then the federal government went, wait a minute, we need to make that 100,000 people. And so Albany, Lebanon, Corvallis combined together to hit that $100,000 to make a metropolitan region.
I see.
To get federal grant money. But that money is your money. And so what's happened is Homeland Security gave the city of Albany a couple years ago a couple $1 million for fire engine and firefighter EMTs. Now my question is, what's the federal government, what's Homeland Security doing giving that money to the city of Albany? Why are there grants being given to different communities so that people can ride the bus for free?
Well, these all sound like nice things for them to do, though.
But somebody's got to pay for it.
That's true.
And that's the problem. See, I can squander my money. I cannot squander your money.
But the federal government can squander my money. Is that what you're saying?
They are squandering your money, and they should not be able to, because it is your money. And so because of my background in financial planning and having worked with clients in the past on taking a look at where they're spending their money and where they can cut the waste, that's what we need to do. We need to get these things back to the states. And so that's really important to do. When we do that, that will give us more money to spend, and when we spend more money, that creates wealth, because we're creating jobs. And so it all ends up working without the government trying to do something, get the government out of the way and let businesses grow and let us spend our money in the manners that suit our needs and our wants and desires. So that's a huge issue.
You had mentioned that land issues were something that were important to you and that you were spending some time thinking about. We're talking with Joe Ray Perkins, Republican running for the U.S. House of Representatives, 4th District in Oregon. And land issues, what do you have to say about it?
This has been in the news lately. Oregon seems to make the news in some interesting ways. The most recent was what happened over in Eastern Oregon in Harney County,
Right.
Malheur Refuge.
The big occupation.
The big
Federal lands
occupation.
there, yeah.
Except for, see, they're not federal lands.
Well,
That's
how
the
it was
problem.
reported.
Exactly. So the Constitution, and I happen to have at least 2 copies in my purse right now, I think. I might even have 3, or I took them all out.
Now that says something for you right away. Not a lot of people run around with a copy of the U.S. Constitution in their purse.
Yeah, there's 2 right there. So the Constitution, and I encourage you to look this up, get to know it. This is the law of the land. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and there's 3 different articles, and I've already mentioned one of them earlier, which is the 10th Amendment, or three different sections. But it says in here that the land that the federal government is to own is 10 square miles. That would be ceded to them for the seat of government. We know that today as Washington, D.C. Oh, by the way, when I say Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, the clause is a paragraph.
I see.
Okay, so that's what that is. So it says that prior to that, it talks about having a militia, and then it goes on in the 17th paragraph to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases over a district of 10 square miles, and that's Washington, D.C. And to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which that land is, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenal, dockyards, and other needful buildings. That's it. That's all it is. So, Jeff, let me ask you this. When was the last time you drove through the Willamette National Forest and saw a fort?
I haven't seen one there ever, actually.
Me neither. I have never seen a fort in the Willamette, the Siuslaw, none of the national forest, not out on the national rangeland.
But aren't national forests a good idea?
No, they're not a good idea, because the farther... We've all seen what happens with absentee landlords. Okay? More often than not, the property is not well taken care of, and that is what is happening here. And it's a violation of the Constitution. So it says that that's all that they're allowed to own. The Constitution goes on in Article 4. It says that all new territories accepted into the Union as a state enter on the same footing as the original 13. The amount of land owned legally and purchased by the federal government for specific issues listed is roughly 3% east of the Mississippi, and specifically on the East Coast, 3% in the original 13 colonies. The federal government has claimed ownership illegally and management of 53% of Oregon.
Wow.
53%.
I had no idea it was that much.
It's huge. So, and people can go online to American Lands Coalition, and they can learn about this, and they have a map, and that was started by Ken Ivory, who is a state legislator from Utah. They have that issue. Nevada, 83% is
Right.
owned by is controlled by the federal government. So this land is there for the people.
So the
that live there.
ranchers that took over that land, or I guess that's the phrase I'll use because that's
Yes.
the best way I understand what happened, and refused to leave. They definitely were upset because
Correct.
they felt as if their rights were being violated and that the federal government shouldn't be
Encroaching.
involved and infringing
Yeah.
on their property rights, etc. Do you feel that there might have been a better way that they could have went about doing what they were doing, or were they pretty much forced to act in the way that they did?
Well, if we say that the federal government does not have legal control, which they don't, according to the Constitution, of that land, then the question is, were they trespassing? The answer is no. If that land belongs to the people, then the answer is no. And they're not trespassing. They were there to support Dwight and Stephen Hammond, who had been dealing with the Bureau of Land Management going back to 1994.
Right.
And the BLM decided they were going to fence off the rangeland and fence off the only watering hole in the area, which meant that the Hammond's cattle could not get to the only watering hole in that area, nor could the wildlife. So this goes way back. This was
Right.
not some new thing. So they
And
have been...
there didn't seem to be any real good reason why the federal government would fence that off anyway.
No, it was to get them to run out of money because, see, that land is rich in uranium.
Right, but that still isn't a good reason.
It's not a good reason unless we allow our government to get out of control. And that's where we need to push back. We don't need the BLM. That was designed so that when and it came from a prior agency, but when we became a state, the agreement was that until Oregon got everything lined out, they would hold the land in trust. The federal government would hold the land in trust until such time as all of our departments were set up. They've been set up for over 100 years, let go of the land. So this group of people went there. Started with Ammon Bundy, and his father had the problem with the BLM down in Nevada. And so Ammon knew what was going on. Now, this is what is interesting. The Bundys are Mormons. Lavoy Finicum, who was shot and killed by the police, his family are Mormon. In the Mormon faith, they are taught not only biblical stuff, they are so strong on the Constitution. It is amazing what they teach in the Mormon church. I was so surprised to find this out. You talk about patriots. They know the Constitution inside out and backwards.
Wow.
And so they knew what they were talking about. They knew that they were legally in the right. So they are now being charged with domestic terrorism, life in prison, and they never drew a gun.
And that just seems so out of hand.
It is, and that's why we need to push back again. A government of, by, and for the people, not for the government.
Before we run out of time,
Yes.
we've got only about a couple minutes here. In
The
fact,
last
about
issue.
a minute and a half. Yeah, you wanted to mention veterans issues.
Yes,
This
yes.
for a long time has been important.
This
to
has
you,
been a huge, huge issue. So first, I would like to thank our current congressman who has just started his 30th year because he's championed the cause of veterans. However, he's done it one at a time, and he's only done it for those people that have contacted his office. So he has a solution for veterans one at a time, and there are thousands of veterans who have the same issues, and they do not get the help that they need. If he has a solution for one, then he's got the solution for all. And then we take a look at veterans that travel from Eastern Oregon on a VA bus 5 hours one way to sit in Portland or Roseburg for 8 hours to find out they're not going to get seen by a doctor to go back.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
crazy.
unconscionable.
Yeah.
These veterans put their life on the line. They need to be able to see their doctor where it is convenient for them and be able to call their doctor's office and not a call center to get in to be seen. We as taxpayers should pay for it. That's one area that I do not have a problem with as a taxpayer paying for somebody to thank them for their service to this country to keep us free. People can find me on my website, Perkins4Oregon.com. And if you want
That's the number 4, right?
The number 4, or they could spell it FOR, it'll still get there.
Okay.
But Perkins4Oregon.com, and I ask for your prayers, your support, your vote, and financial donations so we can get out into the second largest geographic territory or district, which is all of Southern Oregon, except Jackson County.
Perkins4Oregon.com. joeray.com.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Joe Ray, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Joe Ray Perkins, Republican running for U.S. House of Representatives, 4th District. Again, the website?
PerkinsForOregon.com.